Hi, Leah. Hi, Kelly. Are there any questions before the rest of the class comes? No? Alec, everything's clear as mud? Pretty much? Okay. We still have a couple minutes and we have a few people that have not yet arrived. But I'm going to get started at 7. So what I would like you to do is pull out, if you have your sheet on muscles, and let's see if we can start filling that out. And some of this material will be taken from your lab notes. That'll help you. And then I have 2 old labs that I uploaded that are inside this lab at the bottom, and they have a lot of answers, so they'll explain things. So the images, we'll see if I can show images. I know I haven't been able to do a good job on that. We'll see if that improves tonight. All right, so let's talk about what's called dense irregular or dense regular connective tissue. It's going to be a microscope slide. And if I can have everybody turn on your video as well as audio, that'd be great. Hannah, Sarah, Renelle, if you can do that, that'll be helpful. Okay, so when we start talking about different types of tissue, if all the collagen runs in one direction, it gives good strength. So what you're going to find is ligaments and actually the tendons are going to have these real strong collagen fibers, and it'll be different from muscle. A muscle slide will have little ridges, little like ridges through the muscle, and it'll be multinucleate and it'll be red. And so when you take a look at it, what you'll see is there's little dark and light and dark and light spots, and those are the actin and myosin. So the actin are thin fibers and they'll look very white, and the myosin are very thick fibers and they're going to look very broad. So when you look at skeletal muscle, which is voluntary type muscle, you're going to see that it'll have these little light and dark lines on it. Okay, and so that's one of the things that you want to actually look at. And the entire function of a muscle is to shorten. So if I have a muscle, I'm going to have it attached at one point called an origin, and it'll go to the opposite to the insertion. And what you do to figure out what the action is bring the 2 points together. Case in point, we're going to talk about the zygomaticus. It allows you to smile. It's from the zygomatic arch to the angle of the jaw. Take these 2 together, and what happens? I smile. Okay, so we're going to look at temporalis muscle, Alec. So we'll go like on the side of the head to the coronoid process, and we'll bring them together. And so what it'll actually do is, if my mouth is open, bringing these 2 together, it will elevate or close my mouth. So you don't have to really get too nervous about things if you can just think of these 2 points and like, well, where are they? And then just bring them together. That gives you what's called the action. Okay, so we're just going to try and keep it real simple. There will be a slide that'll show a very thin black line, and it's called an axon. That'll be the motor neuron, and it'll go to these muscle fibers, and it'll look like a little foot, and that's the axon terminal. So at the axon terminal, you're going to have this little black area, at least it'll stain black, and that's where a neurotransmitter is going to be released. It's a chemical that will cross from a little vesicle across the junction to what's called the sarcolemma. On the sarcolemma is the receptor on the muscle, and it'll receive this acetylcholine. And then that'll allow for what's called an action potential, and it'll allow for this action potential to go through what's called a T-tubule, which is a transverse tubule across the muscle. And then you have what's called sarcoplasmic reticulum, and that holds calcium. So it will release calcium to the actin and allow the actin head to become open so that myosin can attach to it. And it's like a ratchet that the muscle, these two, it's called the sliding filament theory. So these 2 points, the actin and the myosin, will move over each other. And what they'll actually do is shorten. And then when I want to release that, I just have to go ahead and break the bridge between the two, and it'll lengthen. So that's basically part of the functioning of what the muscle actually will do. There are some layers that we need to know. If I want to put a layer around the entire muscle or organ, I'm going to use the term epimyosin, like epidermis to the outside. And then we're going to have groups of these fibers arranged in what are called fascicles. So wherever I have a fascicle, I'm going to have a perimyosin. And then if you think of this pencil as a fiber, let's say a myofibril in the muscle, it will have a wrapping around it and it's inside, so it's called endomyosin. So real quick, epi is the entire muscle, okay? Peri is around a group of muscle, fibers, and then the individual muscle fiber will have a wrapping called endomyosin. So that's on page 1. Let's take a look at page 2. On the top of page 2, it wants to go over the physiology. So you'll notice that it has, starting right at the top, and I was just talking about this. So you have motor neuron axon. That's sending a signal from the spinal cord down to the muscle to tell the muscle, to contract. So motor neuron axon is G. It will carry a stimulation from the spinal cord or the brain down to the muscle. And then at the axon terminal, the little foot, looks like a little foot, that's H. It contains these little white vesicles that have a neurotransmitter. In this case, it's called acetylcholine. And that will allow the sarcolemma to receive that acetylcholine. So next, sarcolemma is E. It contains the acetylcholine receptor sites. The next term is transverse tubule. So a transverse tubule goes across the muscle and it'll carry this action potential to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So the transverse tubule's letter is D, and it carries stimulation across the muscle. And then just like we learned how the cell has an endoplasmic reticulum, remember how it would come out of the nucleus and it would fold on itself? Well, in the muscle, we have sarcoplasmic reticulum, and that's F. It'll store and regulate calcium ion flow. And then the last two are actin, the very thin filament, and the thin filament actin contains the binding site, troponin, tropomyosin complex, and that has to open. And then the myosin, which is the thick filament, will produce what we call the power stroke. And it's like taking a ratchet, like I was saying. It would so if you imagine things being pulled, pull and pull and pull. So the more little adhesions or anchors that we have, the shorter the muscle gets, okay? At the bottom, it wants you to put these structures into some kind of correct sequence. So first I need a motor neuron axon. Then I need an axon terminal, which is H. So I had G, then I had H, then I had C for the neurotransmitter, which is acetylcholine. Then I had E, sarcolemma, which is the muscle outer layer that where the nerve attaches or the nerve will act upon. And then I have a T tubule, which is inside the muscle itself, carrying a signal across the muscle. And then I have calcium ion release. And then I have A, thin filament, and B, the thick filament. Is everybody with me? So I have G, H, C, E, D, and then I've got A and B. All right, let's take a look at the third page. So what I have is a little chart right here of some of the muscles that we're going to be looking at. But I'm going to use myself for these muscles. And so what I would like everybody to do that's with me right now is under action, if you would, number from 1 to 7. So if we look at it, elevates mandible would be number 1. Raise angle of mouth is 2. Flex head 3. Elevate hyoid 4. Close or protrude lips 5. Extend head 6. And then blink or close eye 7. On the opposite side, it says origins and insertions. These are all those different parts of the bones that we talked or learned. So let's start with 8 sternum and go all the way down to 19. So just label sternum 8, mandible 9, hyoid 10, maxilla 11, right on down to 19. And so what we're going to do is we got to get a handle on these different muscles. Now there's different ways to learn this. I think the easiest way to learn it is to be able to look at a picture. So in your textbook, you have, you know, pictures showing these various muscles, and you just want to see where they are. The action is always how they shorten. Okay, that's what we want to know. All right, so let's talk about orbicularis oculi. So if I have binoculars, what am I doing? I'm looking through two lenses. So when you see orbicularis oculi, we're looking at the muscle that encircles the eye, and that they want you to just know the action. So it's to blink or wink or close your eye. So it is action 7. What about orbicularis oris? This is the oral area. It's the circle around the mouth. And so for that one, it's the kissing muscle, or does what? What's number 5? Closes or what? Protrudes the lips as kissing. Okay. So those are 2, they're kind of easy, but you may mix them up. So remember, binocular, looking through, you know, 2 lenses, or an oral fixation like smoking or something like that. All right, this bone, zygomatic bone. Zygomatic bone is going to attach to the angle. So the origin is 12. The insertion is 15, which is the angle of the mouth, and shorten these 2. And what do? I elevate, I smile. So in other words, here and here, they shorten, I smile. So smile is 2, okay? All right, the next 2 are going to be under the jaw, and one is called mylohyoid. The most important thing to remember about this is, remember the hyoid bone? I said it looked like a little U, and it sits underneath. It was, what did we say about it? There was something unique about that bone. Does anybody remember? Anybody?
It doesn't articulate?
Yeah, it's the only one that doesn't articulate with any other bone. It just sits, like if you look in the circus, have you ever looked at a big tent like Ringling Brothers or any of those tents? They have a big ring, and then all these wires are connected to it. You know, that kind of reminds me of what the hyoid does. So the mylohyoid is going to connect underneath to the hyoid. And so what it does, it kind of gives you an idea where it's coming from. It'll be mandible, that's where it originates, down to the hyoid. So it's going from number 9 as the origin to number 10 as the insertion. But what does it do? Number 4 says, I'll elevate the hyoid a little bit, but what does it do to my mandible? It does what? What does it say for number 4? It depresses my mandible. So a muscle underneath the mandible that shortens does what? It opens your mouth. Does everybody follow? So the other one, digastric, is just a little tiny muscle. You can't even see it. In the picture, it may show it, but it's got 2 bellies, and it kind of slides underneath, and it will depress the mandible as well. So they want you just to know the action for digastric. So digastric and mylohyoid is number 4. Open the jaw, depress the jaw. Okay? All right. Temporalis, this is a hard one. Hey, Kelly, this is one of the hard ones. Why? Why is it hard? It's not hard. It's going to fill up the whole side of the temporal fossa, and it goes, that's the origin of the temporalis, and it goes to the coronoid process of the mandible. And if I shorten these two, what did I do to my mouth? I elevated my mandible, and when I elevate my mandible, what did I actually go ahead and do?
You're opening and closing your mouth.
Yeah. So what I want to do is we want to be real specific. So when I think in lecture, they're going to say like the bicep muscle flexes and extends your arm.
Right.
The way I want us in lab to think about it, and the way I learned the action is when the muscle shortens. Okay. So in this case, when this shortens, it elevates my mandible. So we don't want to say it opens and closes your mouth, because specifically we want to know that temporalis and one other muscle, your chipmunk muscle. Leah, you got a chipmunk muscle right here called the masseter. Everybody make that. My little grandson, I made a funny face at him, and I did this, and I got him to make the same silly face. I don't know why he did it, but he did. And so this masseter goes from the zygomatic process down to the mandible, and it's real strong. It's like you can break jawbreakers with it. So if you stick a jawbreaker in the back of your mouth and close this, it's masseter. It does the same thing as temporalis. Now, why do they do the same thing? They both cross the joint, and so the temporalis on the side of the head going down here to the coronoid process, and the masseter from the zygomatic process down to the mandible, they will elevate my jaw. Okay? So when we look at it, both temporalis and masseter elevate the mandible, whereas mylohyoid and digastric do what? Depress the mandible. So that's the type thing you want to know for like the practical. If we say, what's the action? The action is how the muscle shortens. Okay? All right, there's a muscle called sternocleidomastoid. And on me, if I turn to the side, you can see that there's something down below. So off the sternum and off the clavicle, there's 2 heads, and it'll run up to the mastoid process. So this is a muscle that's going from the front all the way up to the temporalis mastoid, and when it shortens, what do I do to my head or my chin or my neck? I flex. So when we look at sternocleidomastoid, and you know what I want you to do? Put the letters SCM. S for sterno, C for cleido, M for mastoid. And you'll remember, sternocleidomastoid is the SCM muscle, and its origin is 8 and 14. So it's coming off the sternum and the clavicle, and it basically inserts up into the mastoid process. Mastoid process of the temporal bone is number 17. And so the function is 3 to flex. Now, where am I going to find a muscle to extend my head? I need something on the back. So if you look up here on the back, I have these little muscles in the back of the neck, and it's called splenius. So the splenius, and there's 2, there's cervicis and splenius capitis, but they're on the back of the head. So take your humor me, take your thumb and index, put your thumb somewhere at the bottom of your neck and your index on the occiput and shorten it. And what did I do to my neck? I extended. So in other words, when we look at splenius, origin is 18, insertion is 19, and the action is 6. Allows me to extend my head. Okay. All right. So we have a couple more on our last page. And what I want you guys to do tonight and during this entire week is kind of get these down, especially looking at all the pictures and, you know, keep taking the quizzes. I really would like you guys to make sure you get as high a grade as possible during the next week. So in other words, your quiz that you take, you can take the quiz all the way up till your lab next week and get full credit. Like, let's say you get 100, you're going to get 100. But let's say you only got a 70, and then you decided like next Wednesday or Thursday to take the test or the quiz over. I already went in and I wrote your grades down, and it's hard for me with 45 people to go in each time someone decides, oh, I'm going to go take, you know, a certain quiz. So I want you to help me by making sure that during the week you keep working and try and get as high a grade on them as you can. I want to encourage you to go ahead and work on that, you know, study using these quizzes, but I want you to realize that at this point we should be able to get these done and do them enough times during the week that we're not, you know, taking 2 weeks to do it, because I have a lot of things that I need to get done to make sure, you know, I'm presenting the next week's material. All right, let's talk about serratus anterior. On the side of my, let's say, chest, I have a muscle that is serrated. And so it would be in this area right in here, and it's on this area right in here. It's these muscles that, this is serratus posterior, up here on the right. I don't know if you can see it, but there's serratus anterior. And so these muscles are going to run basically on the front up into the back of my clavicle. And so if I have these two muscles shortened, what did I just do with my arm? What did I do? Where are my arms up? Where are they at? Did I abduct them? ABDUCT? I did, like a boxer, right? So serratus anterior, when you look at a boxer, his arms are always up. And so these muscles on the side gives the serrated appearance, because it just looks like a serrated knife. Now, let me tell you a story when you remember this muscle. I was running around a park where I live, and there was this fella that was running on there. I'm running on the sidewalk. He's out in the street, so he's running further than I am. And I'm running, and he's running a little faster, and I run a little faster. And then he runs a little faster, and I run a little faster. And so next thing you know, we're both like sprinting down around this park and stuff like that. But not only was I just running, he was a boxer. So what do you think he was doing when he was running? Had his arms up like this, like he was like punching at the same time. Like, and so as it turned out, yeah, I would see him occasionally at that park. And I guess it was about 8 years later, I'm in Pinellas Park right now, and I would kind of run home. And so running along Park Boulevard using his serratus anterior with his arms up in the air, who do you think I see? The same guy, okay, the same boxer. So if you remember, serratus anterior is the one that abducts your shoulder, number 7, and that it's the boxer muscle, along with the next one, pec minor. It abducts your shoulder as well. So the next muscle is called pec minor. Pectoralis minor is a muscle, first of all, on your chest. If you put your hand on your chest, there's like what fills the front of your chest is this pectoralis major muscle. Well, there's a little muscle going from, let's say your clavicle onto the ribs, and that's your pectoralis minor. Its action is to abduct your shoulder, but it will also elevate your ribs. It allows you to go ahead and elevate your ribs for breathing. So let's take a look at the pec minor. It originates at number 9. Number 9 are the ribs, and it inserts in this is coronoid process of my mandible. This is the coracoid. Remember, just change it to C, process of the scapula. And so the origin is 9, the insertion is on the coracoid process, and the action is number 5. It elevates the ribs when I breathe in. It elevates the rib, and then also it allows me to kind of box, okay? So serratus anterior. Oh, and by the way, whenever you have a muscle that's called anterior, you always have one called posterior, okay? And if you have an internal oblique, if you have internal, then you have to have a external. That's just the way it is. All right. So when we look at the action for pec minor, it's 5 and 7. The next muscle is called the traps. The traps are a muscle that are going to run from the spine, from the occiput all the way down out to the shoulder. It makes a big triangle, and it's on both sides. Your trapezius have 3 different parts. The upper fibers allow me to bring my shoulder up. The middle fibers allow me to bring my shoulder in or back, adduct, and the lower fibers kind of pull down. So when we look at what the action of your traps, go with number 1. It adducts and depresses the scapula. So that's the one that they have in the notes, but it also can bring your shoulder up. It can elevate your shoulder, is what it'll do. There's a muscle between your scapula that has a rhomboid shape. And a rhomboid shape is this arrangement here. So it'll have fibers that run up like so, and it connects between the mid-thoracic and the scapula. And so there's a rhomboid major and minor. And these fibers run from, let's say, inferior to superior, from lateral to medial on a superior angle. So when we look at what the rhomboid actually does, it adducts and elevates. So its action is number 6. And so it's in between your shoulders. It'll allow you to bring your shoulders together. The next muscle is a muscle that is called levator scapula. And the action, listen, this is a hard one. Put an E on levator, and that tells you what it does. So it's called levator, and it's number, let's say the origin is 12, and basically it's, the origin is number 12, and it's inserting into the scapula, and its function is elevate scapula. That's what its function is. So it's number 3. So levator. So if I had somebody in front of me and I have a scapula on a triangle, and this is the right, and I go to the superior angle right in here, everybody help me find it. Take your finger and put it right on the upper part of your scapula. Find the medial border and press in there. There's going to be a ball or a knot. You feel the little knot? The reason that knot is there is because that muscle is like let's say the thickness of 2 of my fingers, and it'll connect to the scapula and go up to the neck, and you always have more weight on your neck. So what's it doing to the scapula? It creates this taut, tight muscle. So anybody that sits at a computer is going to have a knot on the inside of their levator, okay? And it elevates the scapula. The next one we've actually talked about, rectus abdominis. And rectus abdominis is the one that is going to give us the 6-pack or 8-pack, or in some cases, no pack. But if we look at it here, the muscle is, rectus abdominis originates in number 11, pubic symphysis, and it goes to the xiphoid process of the sternum. So rectus abdominis is 11 origin, insertion 13, xiphoid process of the sternum. and its action is to flex. Number 8 is its action. It'll flex the torso and compress the abdomen. That's what the rectus abdominis does. Okay, doke. Then we get to an internal and external oblique. And on this one, these muscles are on the outside. There's really good pictures in your textbook. They'll run on an angle. So if I stand, these muscles are going to be right here. They'll run on a 45-degree angle. There's an external, and the internal would be inside. They will allow me to flex, but actually rotate. So it'll allow me to flex and rotate the torso, and that's for the internal and external oblique. So the internal and external, all you'll see is the external. It's on the outside, but it allows you to twist or laterally bend. And then the last one is erector spinae. And the erector spinae starts actually back here in the sacrum and runs all the way up the spine. So when we're looking at it, the erector spinae is going to run from the transverse processes. It's going to run from origin 16, insertion 15, and it'll run up the spine. And because it's on the posterior part of the spine, it allows me, if I'm leaning forward like so, it allows me to stand upright, is what it'll actually allow me to do. Okay, so that's what it does there. And I think there was one more page. They wanted you to test your knowledge. So I'm going to hold off on that right now, but I would like to go ahead and see if we can do something and go over some material. So let me check. We're going to do this. I'm going to see if we can upload some images that I have. So I'm screen sharing right now. Is anybody able to see what I see? Yes or no?
Yes.
Alec? Are you able to or no? Kelly? Kelly, are you able to hear me? Is there anybody that is able to talk to me? Or am I the only one talking?
Yeah, I can see it.
Everybody can see this?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, all right, good. So let's go all the way to the beginning. So this is how you're going to learn this stuff, okay? So we spent like 29 minutes talking about this dry, Dr. Burns boring me to death again, you know, type lecture. I know, don't worry, I understand. And so now that I've taught you some stuff, Kelly and some of the others in the class, I'm going to ask questions. So what kind of slide is this? If you don't know, what do? You go to the next slide. So it told me, what does it say? Skeletal muscle.
Muscle.
Yeah, it's multinucleated, it has ridges, and it's voluntary. So let's see if I can take a look. All right, you see the little lines in there? Does everybody see the lines, or am I the only one? I'm not even wearing my glasses, guys.
Yeah, I can see the lines.
Okay, so there was little lines in there are the actin and myosin. And so basically what we're looking at, there's like little gaps in here, but this is, if you think about it, a transverse tubule is going to come across something like this. Does everybody kind of follow? And the sarcolemma would be the outer part that would allow a transverse tubule to come across. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So skeletal muscle, it's striated, it's multinucleate, and it's voluntary. What does that mean? That means I can control it. Okay. All right. This is what? Connective tissue, and it's what? It's connective tissue, but what was the name that I used? Remember, I used a certain name.
Dense regular.
Yeah, dense, and it's regular because all the fibers run in the same direction. So this is what a ligament would look like. It's dense regular CT. CT stands for connective tissue. So dense regular connective tissue, it's in tendons and ligaments. I like this slide. I like this slide. Okay, so where's my motor neuron axon? See the little fine lines? That's the axon. Where's the podofoot or the little axon terminal? And then see, this is the muscle. So this area right here would have vesicles with acetylcholine in it. And on the muscle side, I have had a sarcolemma with the receptors. Everybody follow? So this is called a neuromuscular junction. And the neuromuscular junction is where the nerve and the muscle come together. So let's go the other way. There it is, neuromuscular junction. That's called an axon terminal right there. And then it's going onto the skeletal muscle. So it's where the nerve and the muscle join. And it's so the part of the axon is, or the part of the nerve is called the axon. And it's a motor neuron because it's going to a muscle. So motor neurons are going to always go to either a gland or to a muscle. In this case, it's skeletal muscle. Pretty neat, huh? Do you see all these different junctions? So if I need to contract or get more force, I'm going to have more of these little, let's say, neuromuscular junctions exciting the muscle, recruiting these muscles to do a certain job is what I'm actually going to do, okay? All right, so here's a model. So this will give us an idea. Here's the axon number 1. Number 2 is the sarcolemma. See the little white lines there, the little dots?
Mm-hmm.
Those dots are the little receptors for acetylcholine. And then number 3 is the muscle side, the sarcolemma. Let's see if we got that correct. Motor neuron, synaptic vesicles with ACH, and sarcolemma membrane. That's what we said. Motor neuron, the little vesicles with acetylcholine, and the sarcolemma, okay? And this is the model they're gonna have. So motor neuron, synaptic vessel. Okay, that is a T-tubule. Does everybody follow the blue? See the blue? Okay, so it will carry this signal from the receptor that's on the outside, and this will go all the way across, and it'll send a signal across the muscle, you know, fibers, to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is this mauve color or this like cream color. So this is the sarcoplasmic reticulum where the calcium is. The calcium gets released. It allows actin to uncouple, so troponin, tropomyosin unleash, and then you get ratcheting of the myosin, the thick fiber, and the thin fiber. Sarcoplasmic reticulum with calcium and the transverse tubules. T-tubules are blue. Sarcoplasmic reticulum is the white. Number 1, it's not white, it's cream color. The green that they're showing you is what's called a sarcomere. So from T-tubule to T-tubule is like a sarcomere. See these lines across? Right in there. Anyway, you probably can't see my arrow. I'm sure of that.
No, I can see your arrow.
You see my arrow? Cool. Okay. All right. So we had the sarcoplasmic reticulum. They have calcium. They store and then release calcium, and then they take it up. And then the T-tubule had to send the signal that told the sarcoplasmic reticulum, hey, release the calcium. Okay, is what they're doing. Now here's a sarcomere, which is from like T-tubule to T-tubule, and you're going to have thin and thick. So this is actin, this is myosin, is what we're going to have. So let's go to the next. Myosin is dark, actin is light. So the light is actin thin, myosin is dark. Okay, this, when we're looking at it here, motor neuron axon, sarcolemma. So the sarcolemma is this area right in through here. But what is number 1? Let's see. Let's see what it says. Let's go the other way. Number 1 is an endomyosum. So around each individual fiber grouping. Sarcolemma is the cell membrane of a muscle cell. Let's go back if we can go back. So we said this is the endomyosum and sarcolemma. Okay, so the sarcolemma is where the axon terminal, these little feet things, are going to send acetylcholine across. Okay, so let's go this way. All right, so they're just showing you the same thing we just talked about. Let's see if we got it right. Motor axon, axon terminal receptor. Motor neuron, axon terminal receptor. Let me hit the next. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, so this is an old board. This board's been here about 20 years. And so I know that from experience. That's right. I've been around that long at the school. So this is a Z line, and XYZ, that's a Z line. This is an M line. That stands for middle. When the actin and myosin are completely, let's say, pulled together, you will not have a white line like this. It'll all be dark. Does everybody kind of follow? The little red up here is ATP. And so the blue line coming across is a transverse tubule called a T-tubule. And the blue here is the sarcoplasmic reticulum that will allow calcium to come across. So we got actin and myosin. Actin is thin, myosin's thick. Okay, this is just the same thing. Transverse tubule is 1, sarcoplasmic reticulum is 2, and what are these? ATP. For energy. Stuff like this you'll see on the next test. Oh, and by the way, I sent everybody a reminder in 2 weeks, we have test 2. Transverse tubule, sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, now we're into the muscles for tonight. You only have like 20 of them, and that's not bad, but you got to get them down. So this is orbicularis, and remember binoculars when you have 2 of them, but this is an oculi. So it's orbicularis oculi. It allows you to wink or blink. Orbicularis oris, right here around the mouth, number 2. Number 3 is the basically the sterno, that's the sternum part, and the clavicle. So it would be the sternocleidomastoid on the side. So that's the muscle. You don't see where it connects, but that's the origin of this muscle. Okay, sternocleidomastoid, orbicularis what? Oris, orbicularis oculi. That's what we got. Orbicularis means it's circle, and it's around the eye, or it's around the mouth, or it's SCM, sternocleidomastoid. Okay, looking at it from the side, there's zygomaticus from the zygomatic process down to the angle of the jaw. It allows you to smile. Number 2 is the masseter from the zygomatic process to the mandible. When it shortens, if the jaw is open, it'll close the jaw or elevate the jaw. So on the test, you can't just say moves jaw. That will not be an answer. It'll be either elevate jaw or depress jaw. So temporalis fills the temporal fossa, goes down to the coronoid process of the mandible. The masseter is going to go from the zygomatic process down to the mandible, but they both cross the joint and they would close the joint. Temporalis, masseter, and zygomaticus. And these are those little muscles underneath going to the hyoid bone. The hyoid bone is a freely moving bone. So it says 1 and 2. And so mylohyoid and digastric. Digastric and mylohyoid, they're hard to see. This is the serrated muscle, and it's the one in the front. So serratus anterior, it's going to go and basically connect inside to the scapula and pull the scapula up. Serratus anterior, it abducts the shoulder and allows the guy to run and punch and pretend like he's fighting at the same time. I hope he took a break in that 8-year intermediate time, excuse me, that I saw him running. All right. So this would be splenius on the back of the neck. Here's the occiput. Here's the superior angle of your scapula. This is the levator scapula. Put an E in front and it elevates the scapula. This muscle is the rhomboid muscle, both major and minor. The major would be the broader one, and the minor would be this narrow one. I don't make you know minor and major. I just want you to know the rhomboid does what? It adducts the scapula, it adducts, but it elevates. See how the fibers run? So if you don't know what the muscle does, just look where the fibers are, okay? All right. Splenius, levator scapula, and rhomboid. So you got to make sure you know where they are and what they do. All right. This here is the traps. The traps have three parts, an upper, a middle, and a lower. That's why when I said the trapezius adducts, but it lowers the scapula, these fibers here will lower the scapula. These fibers here will abduct the scapula and bring the shoulder up. This muscle on the back is called latissimus dorsi, and it runs up in the front of your humerus, and it'll bring your humerus, it'll adduct and extend the shoulder. So this long, broad muscle is on the dorsum, and it's lateral. That's how it got its name. But it starts down at the iliac crest and runs halfway up the spine, and then runs and attaches up here in the front. So if my arms are out in anatomical position, it'll pop my shoulder up and then allow it to come back and extend. So let's see what they say. Trap and latissimus dorsi. This is the pectoralis major muscle, and here is pec minor. Pectoralis minor abducts your shoulder. It comes off the ribs and connects to the coracoid process of your clavicle, and then, of your scapula, and allows you to abduct your shoulder. This is pec major. It allows you to adduct and flex your humerus. So in other words, from an anatomical position, you can elevate your scapula and flex. And the bottom one is this one, rectus abdominis. And so when we look at rectus abdominis, it's the one that's from the xiphoid process, goes down to the pubic symphysis. It's on your abdomen. That's why it's called abdominis. And it helps to make you stand up, and it's called rectus abdominis. And here it is right here. So it's going to run from the xiphoid process, these ribs. These are little tendinous areas of the muscle. There's like 4 of these. Some of us have 4 that are shown, and some of us hide them pretty well. And so you have 1 of these on each side, but rectus abdominis. So if you look at like your grandbaby, well, not your grandbaby, but my grandbaby, they have a little pot belly, and when they start running around, the rectus abdominis gets real tight and then holds their stomach in. Remember the oblique, external oblique? There's one here, and here's one on the other side. So it'll flex the torso and rotate. So if this tightens, you'll rotate to that side. Internal and external obliques. All right, these are wrappings around the muscle. So we got outer wrappings, and we got medium wrappings, and we have inside wrappings. Let's see what they were going to call those. The outers. Anyone remember the outer wrapping? Epi what? Myosum. And then we have a perimyosum, and then we have what? An endo. Epi is one around the entire muscle. A group of these, let's say these these muscle fibers are put into what's called a fascicle. Fascicles have perimyosum. And then each individual group of these fibers is going to be an endo. Does everybody kind of follow? Let's see if we can find the next one.
So I have a question on the epimyosum. So when you're talking about the muscles,
Right.
The first layer, that epimyosum,
Yeah.
it's going to go in the length, like in the pattern.
It'll be all around. It'll be like take saran wrap and wrap it around the entire big muscle is what it's going to be. It's the outermost group. There's a real good picture in your Ammerman, and it just shows all these fibers kind of being extended out, and it gives you more of an understanding. On the slide where it shows the axon and then the first part of the muscle, that's always sarcolemma, remember? So that's like looking at the micro level of the muscle. Here, we're looking at the wrappings around a huge big muscle. And so when we're looking up here, it's trying to give you an idea. You've got all this stuff going on inside, but then on the gross side, what I see, this part up in here, you need a microscope. That's, you know, like microscopic. This stuff here, I can see the epimysium without a microscope. I can't see the perimysium. And let me go ahead and make sure my battery is starting to run down. Everybody with me still?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So when we're looking at it, the perimysium and endo, you're going to need a microscope in order to see those guys. Okay. All right. Let's see if we have another one. And that just shows you epi, peri, and endo. And I think we're at the end of this. Is what? So let's see what else we have. I don't know if there's any. It's just showing the same thing. So if I go all the way back or through. Okay, so we've gotten through all of the different, this is how you're gonna at least get an idea of looking at these models, okay? That's a serrated muscle because it has a serrated shape to it. The digastric and mylohyoid, they're underneath the digastric has two bellies, the mylohyoid has one, but it's stuck underneath the jaw. I cannot get the digastric. It's hard to see on a model. You're not gonna see it, you gotta actually tease it with a, you know, let's say, in order to see it, you would have to be able to dissect, and they're not going to do it. So in this area, something under here would be like a mylohyoid muscle and or digastric. So these are just some of the different things that you're going to need to know. All right, next week, what do? We're going to look at the upper arm. We're going to look at the lower extremity. And then you're going to have a test, and it'll be over all this stuff. So you don't want this to like jump up on you. You want to kind of look at this stuff as we go. So I'm going to stop sharing now and see if we can go ahead. There has to be some questions. Now, I do not know why we're able to get a good screen share tonight when I didn't do anything differently than what I've done in the past. So maybe our Zoom, I know I must be working better. I bet you guys are working better too. So maybe that's what's actually going on, okay? I'll make sure that the quiz that we have for tonight's lab, or this week, that you can take it many, many, many times and take advantage of that, okay? And tomorrow I'll go ahead and upload this video, but just what did I do? I looked at the terms that I had here. There's two examples of some older labs. You want to open them up and kind of get an idea what's in there. That'll help you. And unless you guys have any questions or want to hang out with me, you know, when everybody leaves, I will check with you next week. I see a lot of hundreds on the quiz, and that's good. I think what I need to say is if you want to get into the health field and you enjoy, you know, knowing things and want to do well, you know, there's some times when things are a little hard. Right now, you got to just get the muscles down. I don't think that's hard. Getting some of the bones down, I think the elbow is hard. That's a hard joint to get to know, but you just got to put a little time in. And when you do that, if it's fun, you will spend the, you know, because you have an interest, you will spend the time with it, okay? Ammerman has some really good little exercises in it as well. So if there are no questions from you, I think I've covered everything that we need to know. And I will see you guys next week. Thank you for your attention. And hopefully I'll get a little better as time goes on. Okay? So have a good night. Thank you. Any questions with anybody?
I have a question
Shoot.
regarding the test. Now I noticed in the tests that we usually do.
The quizzes, yeah.
Yeah, there are multiple questions. Is there like, can the questions be repeated in the practical, like by any chance?
I don't know. They're random.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know what questions you're getting on the weekly quiz. Are you getting the same questions, like 2 of the same? Is that
No,
what you're saying?
I'm talking about like, will it be repeated in the practical?
No, those questions may not be exactly this. It'll be the same material. And just like the stuff that you know here, it'll be similar. Like for instance, remember how we talked about joints? You know, some joints are synarthrotic, some are amphiarthrotic, some are diarthrotic. You got, you know, there's going to be questions that may be a little hard because you got to know what type of joint it is and stuff. That's the hard part. But I don't use those like, you know, those 10 questions for the test. And the test is already made up and it's multiple choice. So there'll be like 50 of them is what they'll be. Was there enough, like was there enough time? Did you run out of time or?
The time was great.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know any other way other than, you know, answer it that way.
No, it's okay. I got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks for being here.
On the test, we're going through chapter 5 through chapter 9, correct?
We're doing labs 5 through 9, but as far as chapters, we're covering more chapters. Like in other words, I think in the textbook it may be more, but it's labs 5, 6, 7, 8, and up, you know, and 9. So we got another muscle. So this is the 8th lab now. We got one more coming in.
One more coming in on muscles?
Yeah, one more. It's the second lab on muscles. So it's just all this, and it'll have, there's a little bit of a review, you know what I'm saying? So that'll be helpful too. I noticed that is in the next one as well. So, I mean.
Is it kind of with the muscles, are we kind of breaking it up like we almost did the bones? Because I remember the bones is more like, okay, this is axial.
Yeah, this is axial and this is appendicular. So what we're going to do this next time, we're going to do appendicular. We're going to do biceps, deltoid, triceps, you know, quadriceps and gastroc, stuff like that.
Okay, so then pretty much really pay attention a lot to the pictures that you have for lab.
Right.
Make notes of those and then just go through. Yeah,
just have an understanding and kind of know, like, don't be afraid if it asks you an action and you go, well, I don't know the action. Well, what did we learn? We learned that the muscle has to shorten. That's the action. And so if here's my bicep and it goes from here to here and it shortened, what did I do to my arm? I flexed it. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, like deltoid, you're going to see there's 3 individual fibers, but as a group, it abducts, ABDUCT. But I can use the front of my deltoid to flex and the posterior third to extend. So just like, remember the trapezius muscle, it had an upper trap and a middle.
Yes.
Here's the trap. It has an upper trap, a middle, and a lower trap. Yeah. So what we're trying to do is get everybody, how do I want to say this, familiar with the material, and you're really learning. What you're doing is getting a handle on how to learn and how to put things, you know, into, you know, organizing the body, basically.
Okay. And will that count as the midterm?
Yeah, that'll be our second test, and then we'll have a third test.
Okay, and the third test is pretty much going to be the final?
The final, and it'll be over the nervous system. And there'll be like 3 huge big labs on the nervous system.
On the nervous system.
So yeah, we're going to have more weeks on the nervous system, but we're going to have more vacation time. Remember Thanksgiving and stuff like that?
Yeah, because I was going to ask about that, because I remember we dismissed in the college last year for Thanksgiving. I can't remember how long that was.
It's a full week here with us.
It's just going to be 1 week?
1 week, yeah. So what we'll do is, so, you know, what I need to do is kind of get an idea, you know, from the different students, you know, if they're not keeping up, this second test, it's a killer because you're going to have to know, you know, where the muscles originate from and where they go to, and that tells you the action. But remember, you have to know the names of the individual parts of the bone or the feature of the bone. So that told you what the bones do, right?
Right, right. Okay.
You know,
and then I'm correct to remember origin is where the muscle starts, and then insertion is basically the end.
The more movable part, where it ends. But your rectus abdominis, the origin insertion, can move. So think about it. If I'm laying flat on my back and I lift my legs up, I'm bringing my legs up over my, over my what?
Yes.
Over my heart. Then I've reversed it as compared to when I'm standing here and I'm leaning down. So in other words, that's one of the muscles that I can switch on.
Oh, so in other words, it's not an absolute fixed point. It depends on from which way you're working that muscle. But I guess for us to learn it, you kind of want it as like,
Right.
hey, as standing up.
Right. Well, yeah, from anatomical position.
Okay.
Yeah, and remember, anatomical was standing like this with your arms. So when I bring my arm like this, my pec muscle, which is on the chest, it'll go from here out to my humerus. It shortens. I've adducted, but I've also flexed my arm.
Okay. And then one last question. When you were showing us of the, I want to say neurons, but I know that's not correct.
The end junction, neuromuscular junction.
Yes. The
Yeah.
muscular. Is that on top of the muscle outside of the epimycelium?
It's inside. It's inside the perimysium. It's on the fiber. And so it took me a long time to realize that a muscle is like a 55-gallon drum. Remember a 55-gallon drum? It has a circular top and a circular bottom and like a ring in the middle.
Yes.
There's one. Well, that's a sarcomere. Well, let's add another drum on top. That's a sarcomere, and another one on top. So that gives you this long structure. Well, that long structure has actin and myosin in it, and it'll have like a neuromuscular junction. And it's, if you think about it, it's like all these little subpacks. So muscles are nothing more than an outer wrapping with an inner wrapping and then an inside wrapping, and then little short things that kind of like contract, proteins that contract, just like in the spindle fibers, it'll pull the nuclear material to, remember, from the inside away.
Yes.
That's a protein that does that. And so that's what these proteins do. They're kind of sliding across and making for a shorter muscle. So it wasn't until I started looking at all this, it's like, they just look like little, one muscle, one little sarcomere on another little sarcomere. That's why I tried to show you, there's a little sarcomere. And I'm glad you told me that you could see the arrow that shows the individual little muscle, area, because that's the muscle cell. And that allows it, all it does is it allows it to contract or relax, or even hold steady. So if I'm holding something in my arm, I'm not contracting or relaxing. I'm just, I'm contracting, but I'm not contracting more. I'm just holding something.
Right.
I'll fatigue out is what'll happen. Okay.
Okay. So when people are trying to lift weight and gain muscle mass,
they rip the muscle, and then the muscle becomes, it kind of becomes stronger because it will build up on itself. So it becomes hypertrophic. So you rip the muscle, micro tear in the muscle. When somebody runs, and you can overwork a muscle. When the muscle tightens up, it's because you've torn or stretched things and it needs time to heal.
So then kind of like that's the reason why when they advise you when you're working out, you're not just doing it, you're not doing weight training like all 7 days. You got to take some days off. And
like one day work, upper body, next day work lower. Remember how they wanted you to break it up? Like one day you're doing upper and lower the next, and maybe one day you go run a little bit and do aerobic. Yeah, that's what they do.
Okay. So it's it's almost similar to the bone, to where when you start lifting weight and putting more resistance with that bone, it's going to trigger the chemicals.
And it'll make your bone stronger. So that's,
stronger.
Yeah, because you're putting more force. The more force on the bone, the more bone needs to be reinforced. So if I'm doing a certain, let's say I'm adjusting, I'm a chiropractor, and I'm extending my arms all the time. Well, my serratus anterior, my pec muscles, and my triceps are going to be strong from using that motion for 35 years. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And if
Yeah.
I'm like twisting somebody, then the serratus anterior are going to maybe be a little bit more, you know, accentuated in
So
somebody
then,
that's using them all the time.
so it is it kind of like you build up your muscle first and then you get strong bone, or does it all happen at the same
I
time?
think it takes time. It develops over time. So your body will make more mitochondria, and the more mitochondria, the better, and the more energy that you have in your cell. So the muscles need more mitochondria. So if you're training and you're doing it religiously, you're doing it on a schedule, then your body is going to go to a peak performance. And the problem is sometimes you can go beyond peak and get hurt because you're doing too much. And I've seen that too, and I've done it to myself. So it's interesting. That's why I like this is the physiology part, and it's the, you know, it's a little bit more interesting to me. You know, like talking about calcium and calcitonin and parathyroid hormone. You know, I kind of like that. You know, in anatomy 2, we talk about endocrine and different hormones. So when you're stressed, your body releases cortisol, which helps you to get rid of the stress. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that definitely cleared up some of my questions that I have
Good.
as far as bones and muscles are
Okay.
concerned, because I was always kind of wondering, well, you know, we do a lot of heavy like resistance training, and like you said before, the guys bulk up pretty good. Females, it's like, okay.
Well, we have more test.
Testosterone
Yeah, we have more. We just have more testosterone is all. But if you looked at, and I don't know which Russian, there was one of the Russian, I'm trying to think, track teams. They all were, every one of them were juicing, so to speak. You know, back they got banned. So a lot of the Russian athletes were just banned from the Olympics because they were using substances that would enhance their performance. You know what I mean? So like whether even in baseball, you know, there was no real rule, but Mark McGwire and Barry Bonds, you know, they don't want to put them in the Hall of Fame because they look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know what I'm saying?
I have the baseball card of Mark McGwire when he was in the Oakland A's minor league.
Yeah, he's a little kid.
He was tiny.
Yeah, so was Manny Ramirez. And Manny came back from like summer, like from, let's say, the winter to the spring, and he bulked up. He'd been taking, you know, some steroids to get bigger. Yeah.
Are the steroids bad for the muscle and the bone?
Well, it's bad for the brain because steroids cause a lot of, well, they create hypogonadism. They'll make the gonads, like if you get artificial anything, glucose, I mean, let's say, if you're getting insulin from another source from other than yourself, then your body's not going to make it because you're not asking the body to make it. So it stops making it because you're getting it from somewhere else. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but there's side effects of all the different things, like, you know, the rage that comes on. So some of the road rage and the, you know, being on testosterone and, you know, acne. So you see a lot of changes is what you see in people.
Well, for women, they didn't say so much in the text, but like for the bones and osteoporosis, osteoporosis that happens on the onset from menopause. What about women that receive therapy, like hormone therapy?
It'll help to keep it, but by the time some of this therapy starts, it's already too late. So we learned in chiropractic school that when a woman is, let's say 35, she needs to be taking calcium every day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And probably 1,000 to 2,000 units of vitamin D in order to keep calcium. And then they saw that somebody that actually had a child, you would think that they would have less calcium in their bone.
Right.
But somehow Mother Nature, the body, a woman's body, replenishes that calcium back into her bone. Now, if you're of, let's say, the black race, then you're not going to have osteoporosis. Your bones are going to be strong. That's not, and then the diet is good because a lot of the different foods have a lot of calcium in it. But Osteoporosis is more of a European disease. And if somebody has European descent, you know, whether you're from Germany or England or Ireland or any of those, you know, places, and you're a female, then
Mhm.
you're going to have a tendency to be osteoporotic unless you exercise and lift weights, and then you're going to be stronger.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, that answered a few of my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Have a great night.
Thank you, you too.
Okay. Bye-bye.